Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's edition of Think Beyond IP's LinkedIn Live. I do these every last Wednesday of the month at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Although I do want to say that for November only, and we'll see about December, I haven't decided yet, but for November, I'll be doing it on the third Wednesday since the fourth Wednesday will be the day before Thanksgiving, and hopefully we will all be taking it easy that week. And so I talk to you for about 15 minutes and then take any questions that you may have. These topics always come from you or from my work with clients. This month's LinkedIn Live was inspired by work with a client where I did an audit of one of her offerings, and she had a lot of links to third-party materials in there, and so that is important part of understanding whether or not we have a right to use some of the materials in our content and in our offerings. And so I thought it'd be great to talk to you about some of the legal issues that are involved with linking. So I welcome your questions at any time. Please feel free to put them in the chat and I will get them. Please note that there is a bit of a delay. It can be up to a couple of minutes between when you put your questions in the chat box and when I get them. And so if for whatever reason I don't get your question during the live stream, I will absolutely make sure that I answer them in the comments on LinkedIn. And this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and the recording will be available on my profile on LinkedIn and also on my YouTube channel. So let's get into the legal side of linking. And so, links all day, every day, they're everywhere. We use them all the time in all manner of our content. My friend Linda Howard mentioned that we use them in social media, but we use them everywhere. They're all over my website. They're in my paid content. They're in my free content. They're on LinkedIn. They're a part of 21st century, using the internet. And so we don't really give much thought to linking because it is so ubiquitous. However, there are some issues we need to think about regarding the rights that people have in the material that you are linking to. And so I'm going to talk about 3 specific types of linking that can get people into trouble: deep links, embedded links, and framing. So first, deep links. And so deep links are what, like why is it deep link versus just linking? And basically it's because you're linking to a page on a site that's not the home page. And that happens all the time, right? We find a resource, it's typically not on the home page, and we link directly to the resource on the page. I used a couple of examples that won't get me into trouble today. This is where I was a guest on a podcast, and we had a link to Aaron Austin. That was not a link to my homepage. That was a link to the About page on my website. And so why is this an issue? Well, for one, a surprising number of websites do not want you to deep link. Here's an example where they want you to link just to their homepage. I have another example later on. They want you to either just link to the homepage or to just use the name, their name, BoardSource in this example. And so they do this. Why do they care? Well, because they have a very specific journey that they want visitors to their websites to go to. Their homepage is their start here. And when you divert them from the homepage, they're not getting the experience that they want them to have. And so they're just coming in and out. They're just popping in and out. And they're not really hanging out and seeing the other offers. And so you kind of, take away some of the value that visitor has to being on that site. And so it's, as I was doing this audit, I kept finding, sites that were like, don't deep link. And so it's something to be mindful of. The other two things I'm going to mention are contributory copyright infringement and circumventing copyright controls. Now, these two apply to the other types of linking that I'm going to talk about, but I'm just going to put them up here, but they would apply to the embedded linking and the framing as well. So contributory copyright infringement. Well, unless you are sure that the material that you are linking to, that source has the right to display or copy that material, then you, by linking to it or doing the others, you may also be committing copyright infringement. So you need to be mindful of the sources that you're linking to. It's just because it's a link doesn't mean you're home free necessarily. So if somebody finds out that you're linking to copyright material, you may get looped into some claim there. So just be mindful of that. The other is circumventing copyright controls. Now, if you're linking to something, maybe that was behind a paywall. I imagine that paywalls are pretty sophisticated these days. It's probably hard to get around, but you don't know. There may be something that the link really is only available to certain people. So that it's not like findable, through a Google search or something. So the only reason that they're even aware that material is there is because of your link. And so you may be sharing materials that maybe you have a right to see, but you don't have a right to share it with third parties. And so we want to make sure that, again, you have the right to share that material with your audience as well. Embedded links. So embedded links is when you're actually kind of taking material from a third party and putting it on your site in the form of a link. And so here's an example from my website. This is my podcast guesting site where I was on Jonathan Stark's Ditching Hourly podcast. And here, this photo of Jonathan is actually a link. If this was live, you would see that the cursor would turn to the finger and you could click on it and it would take you to his podcast site. So this photograph does not reside on my website. I actually don't even have permission to use this on my website. But it is something that we do very commonly for those of us who, speak or go on podcasts or have podcast guests. When I have a podcast guest, I get permission to use their photograph on my website. In this case, we linked here, and I'm assuming I don't have permission. I might, but probably I do not. And so, but it is considered an embedded link because this photograph rests on Jonathan's site and is used as a link. And so why is that a problem? Well, does this thumbnail, infringe the owner's copyright? Jonathan owns the copyright in that photograph as well as his, privacy, his own personal rights because it's his image. And so if, for instance, I was just writing an article about something that he did on his podcast, he mentioned on his podcast. And so this is just in my blog post, and I do the same thing. I take that image and I put it on my website. And yes, it still links over to his podcast, but it wasn't part of the relationship that I have as a podcast guest. And it was just me as a stranger linking to it. That would be a copyright infringement. Let's say instead of his photograph, I took a line out of the his podcast. And there was some really important point that he made, and I used that as an image. So does he have copyright ownership of that excerpt from his podcast? Yes, he does own the copyright in that. Maybe that takes us to the next level of, okay, yes, he owns that image. Yes, he owns that excerpt. Is it fair use when I take just, 2 sentences from the podcast and use it as a link, as an image link to his podcast? And obviously fair use is, Very fact specific, but it's something to think about. Let's say I just used his logo. Hourly is nuts. Billing hourly is nuts, I think is his logo and or tagline. And so does he have copyright ownership in that? Well, we kind of know if you've been following me regarding copyrights, that logos and taglines are not eligible for copyright protection. So maybe using his tagline instead of using an excerpt from the podcast or a photograph would not be copyright infringement. So these are just all examples, something to think about. Now we come to framing links. So framing is when you actually take the content from the other site and you kind of put it in a window on your site. So you're actually copying the text from or the image from the other site, and it is appearing in a frame like on your site, and that is a link. So you could actually click it and get to the original source, or you could just read it right there on your site. And so I couldn't find an image. It's one of those things that you come across, and when you're trying to find an example to create a slide, it was not happening. And so I went to this, I borrowed this example from LinkedIn, which happens where when we are reposting something, that's what happens. We take somebody else's post and we add our commentary to it on the top, but their entire post is here and we can read the post here. But for LinkedIn, obviously, we agree to terms and conditions by posting on LinkedIn that people have permission to repost your stuff on LinkedIn. And so that wouldn't be a violation. But if it is, on just someone else's site and they don't give you permission to do that, that is most likely a copyright infringement. It is absolutely a copy of their material, even though it's a link, but you are publishing it on your site and your audience can get that content without going to the other site. So you are publishing a copy of it. Most likely, I should have said, most likely it's against the terms of use. It's very rare that you will have terms of use of a website that says, go ahead and copy my work. Some do, but it's not the most likely scenario. Most likely it will say something like what we have here, and that you can't reproduce or copy without the express permission. That's the most likely scenario that you're going to come across in your terms of use. And citation is not permission. I've definitely talked about that before. The only way to get permission is for the copyright owner to say, yes, you can copy my work. The fact that you've cited it does not give you permission. And so framing is probably a copyright infringement if you do not have permission from the owner. And you can I'll talk about this in the next one. So best practices to avoid copyright infringement. We're going to talk about terms of use, of course, linking agreements, and posting, I should probably say posting, linking disclaimers. So first, we've talked about the terms of use, and here's another example. And this is an example where you can link to the home page, but you can't link to any other page without permission. They have a contact for you here. And so make sure you're looking at those terms of use. That's what that link at the bottom of the page on almost every website these days has some sort of terms of use, and it will tell you what you can and cannot do with the content that you find there. And by the way, this linking to the site, that was not something I added. That was just a heading within their terms of use. And usually it's not hidden in there, that you can find it pretty easily. You do have to read it though. I know almost none of us read terms of use, but you do. If you want to link to a site, you're going to have to read those terms of use and find the provision. It might be something as obvious as linking to the site. It might be permissions. It might be intellectual property or ownership. These are all some of the headings that you might find it under. And often also they might have a search search function, so look for that as well. This isn't linking, but how about screenshots? Screenshots, Selena, screenshots are a copy of the original content. And so if you are taking a screenshot of someone's content, of somebody's web page, then if the content within that screenshot is eligible for copyright protection, then all of this would apply. Yes, you would need to have permission to use it. If you're going to be making copies of it and distributing it, all the things that copyright owners have exclusive rights to make copies, to display it, to make derivatives of it, all those things are the exclusive right of the copyright owner. So if you want to do any of those things with the screenshot of somebody else's site, then you do need permission to use it. So linking agreements. I actually don't have an example of this, but mostly because don't want you to be afraid of this. The term agreements is kind of overdone. It really is just about getting permission, about getting consent. You're just getting a non-exclusive right to consent, permission to link to something or to copy something. So it can be just as simple as, in our example here, probably you just need to send an email to them and say, hey, I want to link to your, for something that's a deep link on the homepage. I want to link to your, the article that you wrote about, screenshots. And so it's going to be on this site, and I'll give you a citation, give you credit for it. And they can just say, sure. And that's all you need. It doesn't need to be something fancy that people sign. But you do want to have something in writing so that you have a record of it, just in case the person who gave you permission goes away. What about linking to media and so that would also, the source is still there. Go to their terms of use. Harvard Business Journal will have permissions for reusing their content, and they will all be there for you. And so there's not, just because it's a media doesn't mean, again, that any use is free. Now, this is different, by the way, than using something, in the context. Let's say you're writing an article about, using AI, and you read something in Harvard Business Journal, and you're going to use it, as part of the conversation, as part of your analysis. Then you can cite, I read an article, Harvard Business Journal, and this is what they had to say about it. That doesn't mean you need to get permission from them just to talk about what they wrote about. But if you're going to be taking excerpts from it, and then depending on, that becomes a fair use question about whether or not you need to get permission, or if it would just be fair use, and then you can use that quote. Let's see here, Daniel. How about the common practice of posting a link to an article on LinkedIn? Yeah, so that is the terms of use of LinkedIn will absolutely cover that. Being able to use the functions of LinkedIn, when you post on LinkedIn, you're agreeing to people reposting it and commenting on it. That is part of the functionality that we get with LinkedIn. And even with publications, the example that I wanted to use for the framing was when I'm on, in my browser reading an article, and it will have a button on there where you can repost it to LinkedIn. And if you hit that, it pops up the article, and then asks you to, add your commentary. And I just couldn't find one last night when I was doing the slides. But absolutely, when they put that button on there to let you, easily repost it to LinkedIn, they want you to do that. And so they have given permission for that. What about linking to YouTube videos for educational purposes? Again, YouTube videos are copyright protected, And so if you are linking to it, then the linking, I do not know YouTube's linking policy, and I do not know if individual creators can change that. I don't know the answer to that, but you would then look at YouTube's terms of use regarding linking. And so one of the things that I'll mention, I'll just say it now, the formality with which you get you make sure you look at your terms of use. So I'll finish this and I'll get some of that up. The linking agreement. Again, it can be pretty informal, but you may want it to be pretty darn formal. You may want to have it in writing and signed, depending on how you're going to be using it. So let's say in your YouTube video purposes, let's say you are creating a course and you're going to be selling this course, or you're going to have subscriptions to this course. You have a subscription site and you're putting YouTube videos in there that people are paying you for, and you want to use it in there. You want to be pretty formal about getting permission to use that, because if someone tells you to, doesn't like it and tells you to take it down, send you a cease and desist, it's going to be pretty darn embarrassing when you have to go back to your subscribers or go back to the people who bought your course and remove that video from it. So, that's one thing if it's a blog article that's, here today, gone tomorrow, frankly, versus if it is some kind of evergreen content or a course or something that you're selling, that means more formality. All right, and then the linking disclaimer. This one, by the way, I got from ChatGPT. Not that I haven't been using it for the last, when did I discover ChatGPT? Time goes so fast. I think it was 2 years ago, right? 2022. But I've been using a little more lately when I just want to go, you know what? I don't even feel like drafting this. Let me just see what ChatGPT comes up with. And so I asked it to draft a linking disclaimer where I'm going to have links on my website to third parties' websites, and I want to have a disclaimer. And so this is the language that it suggested. I actually did not make a single change to it, which really covers what you needed to do. That once you follow a link, that you're then subject to the terms and conditions of that link, and that you're not it's not an endorsement or anything like that. And to ask, if there is a problem with when you go to that link, then let us know so we can remove that link. And so that's a pretty standard linking disclaimer that you would want to think about, if you have lots of links on your website. If you're going to use it in some paid content, then I do want you to do your diligence, not just kind of throw up a disclaimer, but really do your diligence about what you're going to be using there. So in sum, don't make any assumptions. Internet, Wild West, we see all sorts of stuff on the internet that people honestly shouldn't do. But I mean, it's, who's going to, for the most part, people don't get caught. And that is the truth. People do a lot of stuff that they shouldn't do. They don't get caught. But that doesn't mean that you should do it, because what we're doing is we're building assets that we own and control so we can create leverage from them. And if we have materials in our content or in our offerings that we don't own, that can end up with us getting a cease and desist, that sucks. We don't want that to happen. So let's make sure we do all of our linking, any content we're using from a third party, whether it's screenshots or linking or reposting, that we are kind of dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And that is our job, putting ourselves in their shoes. Think about all the content that we create. We all create content, and we would want people to have the same respect for our content, and we should do that for them as well. And, always, always, always start with the terms of use. Every website today has them. It's, extraordinary for someone not to have, even if they took it off of some, other website, everyone's got them. And make sure you understand what you can do when you proceed. Let's see here, Ruth. Oh, yes. So with respect to AI, the ChatGPTs of the world, you absolutely must assume that they may have stolen somebody else's materials. So there are AI platforms that provide representations and warranties about everything that is in there. This next generation of AI platforms, they are getting licenses for all of the materials that are going in there. So, the first generation, they were just scraping the website, right? And whatever's in there's in there. But the new generation of AI platforms, they are getting licenses. They're doing these massive licenses with, Associated Press and Reuters and New York Times and whoever to get these massive databases for their content. So again, read the terms of and conditions of the platform that you're using. Some will provide reps about what the output is, and some will not. So you do need to be mindful of that. All right. So thank you so much for your questions. I love it. And if there are any other topics that involve copyrights, I'm the copyright person, not your trademark person, but any questions you have about copyrights, questions that you have about AI, and questions you have about your contracts with your corporate clients or with your contractors, please let me know, and I'd be happy to cover one of those topics in a future LinkedIn Live. And I hope to see you on the third Wednesday of November at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for the next one. Thanks so much.